The Brazilian government is currently lobbying the World Wildlife Fund to reduce protection on Amazonian rainforest in order to create jobs in the lumber industry. This alone shows that the government's priority is never the animals, the biodiversity, but rather their short-term economic incentives. Team Wills is proud to bring you a three-part case. Firstly, it will tell you why the state is incompetent in preserving animals. Secondly, we will explain to you how private entities are better suited to protect animals. And thirdly, a second speaker, Ariana, will explain to you why state involvement creates vast levels of corruption. Before that, what do we support on Team Wills? One, we support private sanctuaries, research labs, and breeding centers, all things which are in general needed for the preservation of endangered species. Secondly, we think that it is possible and it's sensible for the state to regulate these centers and these private entities. But the state does not need as much money to regulate these entities as they do to actually run the very preservation schemes which are necessary. That's the particular reason why regulation is important in this instance, but not state-run services and systems. Well, thank you. Now, where do we think this debate occurs? Where are most endangered species found? We think this occurs in areas with high biodiversity, which are often, in the vast majority of instances, places which are close to the equator. Take, for example, South America, in the Indian subcontinent, equatorial rainforests in Nigeria, for example. The nature of these countries, what they all have in common, is that they are often undeveloped economically. Take, for example, Brazil, Indonesia, Tanzania, Congo. These are all regions with high unemployment and a large percentage of the population which live under the poverty line. All these places, panel, have high biodiversity within them. This is what all places with endangered species have in common. Now, that being established, why do we think that such states are incompetent and structurally incapable at preserving wildlife and endangered species? I'll bring you 5 comprehensive reasons. Firstly, states, especially these particular states, have other priorities and present issues. If half the population cannot feed their children or put roofs over their heads, we think it's impossible for them to then prioritize state funds and money to things like wildlife preservation, to things like endangered species. We think that they have much more pressing needs which they need to attend to. Secondly, these states in the vast majority of instances just don't have the resources to preserve wildlife. Note that preserving wildlife is actually a very expensive expenditure, I should say. Firstly, you need to hire breeding specialists. You need to pay for rangers to enforce your regulations. You need money for preservation research, as to say, research which will enable you to actually figure out how to preserve these animals. These things all cost money, panel, and these states in the status quo just don't have the kind of money that is necessary to do all these things. That's another reason why they're inefficient at preserving endangered species. Thirdly, where there's wildlife, there's natural resources. Here's an example. Trees in the Amazon rainforest, when those leaves fall, it creates fertile land which can be used to grow soybeans, as has been done in the Amazon rainforest at the moment. You have medicinal plants in these very diverse areas, medicinal plants which can be good for harvesting, good for the state's economy and the healthcare system. You often have very productive things which can be harvested from these regions. The government then would misappropriate these resources from land for their economic gain. They have no incentive to preserve these things in these regions when they can be gaining so much more from it. Team Sweden might come up here and try to tell you that, oh, but what about wildlife tourism? When governments preserve wildlife, that means they get more tourists coming in, and that's revenue. Panel, the fact of the matter is that tourism is a very unstable industry. That's to say, you don't know when tourism is going to be off and when it's going to be on. Therefore, government cannot rely on tourism for their GDP and for their income. That's why they're going to prioritize all these other things I've pointed out to you over tourism. We just don't think tourism is an issue in this debate. It's not comparable to the substantive material we're bringing to you. The fourth reason why governments are structurally incapable of preserving wildlife in these regions. Realize that people in these nations want to use these areas for their industries. They want to build factories so they can have more jobs. They want to build houses so that they can have roofs over their heads and are not shivering in the cold at night. They want land for agriculture. I point you to the example of where in places where there is a slash and burn phenomenon, where people often burn down trees, grow crops there, and then move on, leaving the area completely barren of the diversity which existed there beforehand. This is the incentive that people have in the status quo within these regions. Given that governments are accountable to the people, given that when elections come, it's people who vote, it's not animals who vote, it's people who vote, that government then has every incentive to cut down trees, to carry out these actions in these areas. That's particularly harmful because that's precisely what destroys wildlife, what destroys endangered species. That's one of the reasons why they lose this debate. Fifthly, panel, the easiest area for governments to remove money from, to remove funding from, when they're enacting policies, is wildlife. That is to say, and there is a rainy day, when there's an economic recession and the government desperately needs funding for healthcare, for anything like in the case of like a medical epidemic, for example, when they need to remove funding from one sector to another, the easiest place for them to do this, for them to cut those funds, is from this sector of preserving endangered species. Because the fact of the matter is that just not that many people care about endangered species, and so government will take the money from there, in a second, put that money in other places where it's more necessary, where it's more pressing. That's another reason why governments have no incentive and just incapable and inefficient at preserving wildlife, preserving endangered species, which is what this debate is all about. Yes?
So seeing as the communities you describe are often most reliant on the ecosystems that they exist in, wouldn't it be in the government's incentive to actually protect these ecosystems?
I'm sorry, we reject that premise. We don't think communities are reliant on lions which run about in the forest next to them. We just don't think, I think what they're telling us is like some Amazonians who live on trees and in treetops. That's not what we're talking about this recently. We're talking about people who need roofs over their heads, who need to cut down trees for that very wood which they will use to build those houses. We don't think communities are that dependent on these regions. That's why that point of information does not stand in today's debate. On to my second point of substantive. Why are private entities better at preserving wildlife? 3 reasons. Firstly, private entities, for example charities, are made for the precise purpose and for the specific commitment of preserving endangered species. This is particularly important because, as I explained earlier, governments often have other alternatives in alternative places where they can reinvest the money which they currently allocate to preserving endangered species. Private entities cannot do this. They will not do this because their very purpose for setting up was to preserve those species. That's why money is always with private entities going to be given to this purpose. Secondly, private entities can often, in their nature, they secure funds from investors for beforehand preservation. That's to say, there is a steady flow of income, there's money that has been set aside for these entities to actually preserve endangered species. As they get investor funding, they calculate the risk beforehand, they calculate the risk that they're going to be taking on in actually going on this venture. That is the reason why you are more likely to have a secure funding, enough money to actually preserve endangered species. As I explained to you, it takes a lot of money to preserve these species. Private entities do that better. And thirdly, panel, I think private entities are often set up by rich philanthropists in the developing world, for example. They set up charities and private entities which they want to use to preserve endangered species. The fact of the matter is that these people have the money to do this and they have the money to do it well. And furthermore, they also have an incentive to maintain a good PR to come across as a person with goodwill and good intentions. That incentive is the reason why rich philanthropists in the first world, for example, are most likely to invest a lot of money into these things as compared to the state which they are defending, which I've explained does not have the funds and does not have the right prioritization to actually allocate money to these causes. Panel, in conclusion, because we believe that states are incompetent in preserving endangering animals, we're very proud to stand in that position.
The first speaker from Turkey spent 7 minutes 48 seconds.
I would like to thank the first proposition for the speech. Now, the only case of the opportunity, let's call upon Mr. Jones.
We think the world is at a turning point right now when it comes to, for instance, species, when it comes to, for instance, climate change, when it comes to all issues that often many entities try to deal with. But we think that the problems have reached staggering proportions. We think more species than ever are suddenly at risk. We think this is such a big problem that small entities such as NGOs can't deal with it. We need governments that's why I'm so proud to oppose. So before I move into my arguments and my rebuttal, I just want to make some things clear. So we think when it comes to the metric, more effective, they never really put up a burden for what that means. Here's what we think we're going to prove on this side of the house. So first of all, we are going to prove that governments are better at changing harmful behavior when it comes to individuals, or when it comes to, for instance, corporations, that kind of thing. We also want to prove that governments are more resource efficient. And we think this debate will not be won by like proving exclusive benefits or harms on either side of the house, but it will be won when we make the final weigh up and we see whose benefits are larger. Also, we want to be clear, like we don't seem to, because it's unclear on Team Wales if they're like against government funding overall, but we're not against NGOs. We just want to see which one is NGOs or governments more effective with spending the resources they have. I have three arguments on our today. The first one is that governments are in a better position to influence society in a meaningful way. The second one is that governments can be more pragmatic with their funds. And the third one, which Noah, my second speaker, will take up, is how governments are more resource efficient. So before I move into my arguments, let's do some quick hear what I have to say to that case. So first of all, I just want to point out we don't think that this debate is exclusively about passiveness. We think it's also a part of this debate which is about how do we use the resources and who uses the resources best. Government agencies and governments overall who try to divert their money to protecting species, or NGOs. We don't think they've engaged in this debate on this topic. So then we also, when it comes to we don't think this debate exclusively takes place in the developed world, because we think species being threatened is something of a global problem. So, for instance, in the Nordic countries where we come from, fishing and overfishing is a big problem, and many species are under threat there. Also, globally, for instance, bees and they being threatened is a threat there. So we reject them trying to place the debate exclusively in the developing world. But however, let's engage on that just about the developing world. So we think, first of all, they say that these states have more pressing needs and it costs a lot of money. That's why we say it's really good that, for instance, the UN, for instance, the EU, and just states overall have foreign aid, which often divert to these countries on the condition that they can spend this money wisely and to, for instance, protect species and stop climate change. So we think those kinds of impacts. We think funding will always be the case on all sides of the house, because we think there is always money pouring in from different governments to vulnerable governments to even out this hole in the budget. We also think, when it comes to like development, and that they'll always prioritize development, we think that's why it's good that we have pressure from other governments who can make sure that there is sustainable development. So, for instance, the Paris Climate Agreement is a great example of this, and this protects many species who are vulnerable because of climate change. We also think, that we reject the characterization that like there are no incentives, because we think, first of all, the very kind of things we're talking about with this protecting species is often something that isn't directly correlated to, like, say development, because often like having some kind of area there. So we think there are incentives to keep these species, also because there are good thing. There are good things that come from these species. So, for instance, they can have zoos, which are beneficial on their side of the house. Now, let's move on to the first argument on our side about how governments are in a better position to influence society in a meaningful way. And at the end of this argument, I will assume that governments are better able to curb harmful behavior towards species. So, first of all, let's talk a bit about how species are harmed, because this they haven't told us about. First of all, we think there are things such as poisons, because there are various poisons that exist in various products that we produce, and often they bioaccumulate, so they often end up impacting the highest consumer the most. So, for instance, birds, which eat birds. Another thing is deliberate harming or killing of species. So that can be like poaching. That can be, for instance, like there are only 3 white rhinos who are left in the world today. It can be things such as hunting. We saw the big Cecil lion incident a few years ago. And it can be things such as overfishing. Those are things, the effects of global warming harm animals, especially when it and not only just animals, but also organisms, such as coral reefs, are very harmed by this. And we also think, in a sense, human development and expansion harms it as well. So, for instance, deforestation of the Amazon, that kind of thing. All those things harm animals. Go ahead.
More often than not, governments are populists, which means when timber is like deforestation happens in Indonesia, the Indonesian government often does not stop villagers from doing it because they have populist incentives.
Yeah, so we think, first of all, we think it's very good that we have pressure from other governments, which often places some this kind of limits on them. But we think, second of all, even though there is often populism in some societies, we think as there is a threat, you know, for instance with deforesting, when it comes to global warming, you think governments realize that this is too much and that they can't do this to 100%. So let's analyze the problem of all these things I listed, why animals specifically and organisms are the ones being harmed. We think it's human behavior, because humans are ultimately the ones that are responsible for this. So it's not like natural causes. So the question is, who has the best influence on humans and can change their behavior? So we think NGOs are often limited to like shaming people. So they say like, don't do this because it harms animals, or like they make exposés showing harmful things to animals. And they often have large PR campaigns. We think ultimately they don't have that much power. That's the largest power they have. It's quite small. We think the problem is that it's the profit incentive that comes from harming animals. That's things such as overfishing. You make a lot of money of that. It's like big companies, you can't really change them unless there is a really, really enormous backlash, which is very, very uncommon. So we think, what can government do that is impossible for NGOs? We think, first of all, they can make things illegal. So they can make certain chemicals illegal. They can make hunting and killing species illegal, such as EU fishing rules is a great example of this. And they can create profit incentives, such as making endangered animals more expensive to eat. So we think, importantly, these are things that NGOs can't do, but governments can do. So we think they have power in that kind of way. Second argument about how governments can be more pragmatic with their funds. We think NGOs often have to rely on PR campaigns to ensure that they have funding. So what they'll do then is focus on certain animals. That's things such as pandas, it's things such as orangutan, which we as humans can easily empathize with. We see, for instance, WWF mostly spends their money on these kinds of animals because that's where they get their resources from. We think the problem is this is wrong prioritization. So when it comes to the most harmed animals, are often fish, it's often bees, it's often microorganisms, which are very difficult for humans to relate with on an emotional level and therefore to fundraise from. So therefore we think governments have the ability, and they often do, to focus their resources on those kind of animals instead of focusing on animals which might be easier to have emotions with, but aren't as important as other things. Thank you.
Fourth speaker from opposition team spent 8 minutes 18 seconds.
I thank the first opposition for his speech. Now, in the case of the proposition, let's call upon Ms. Anne.
Team Wales today is proud to stand under the team line that states incompetence endangers animals. So far, the case we've heard from Sweden has left the reasons why this is the case completely left standing on our side of the house. And that is why already they've shown to us that they can't really dispute that states are the most ill-placed actor to protect endangered animals. We are so proud to propose this motion. I will be giving 5 points of rebuttal as to the case that we've heard today and their facile attacks on ours, and then be extending my partner's case that he's brought so far by talking about why state entities encourage and will cause corruption. Firstly, onto my rebuttal. They started off by giving us a little bit of a model attack about how, well, this actually doesn't happen in developing countries, it's also in developed countries. And they gave us the example of Sweden, that, because we have lots of animals we have animals in Sweden as well, and this means that we should protect them as well. Firstly, we gave you statistic reasons why biodiversity is most prominent near the equator, which occurs in countries in South America, countries like Brazil, countries like Tanzania, which are also close to the equator, right? They didn't respond to this in any analytical way, only said, well, Sweden has animals too. Secondly, we tell you that this also applies in developed countries, right? Because when people in developed countries, a lot of people have more extra time because their basic needs are met. So they're likely to care about these animals more. So they are likely to put money towards our organizations that are private, that are going to help animals be conserved in the Congo, for example. No, thank you. And as a result, these private entities are going to be helping the developing countries to help better their endangered animals, given that the example of Sweden doesn't really apply, given that the animals that they gave us aren't exactly the most endangered animals. They're not the tigers of sub-Saharan Africa, right? Secondly, they tell us that foreign aid is used in terms of animal protection. Ladies and gentlemen, when Brazil has an unemployment rate of 72%, foreign aid doesn't go to the animals that live in the Amazonian rainforest. It goes to the people starving on the streets, the people living in the slums that surround Rio. What we think happens is this a massive mischaracterization of foreign aid. I encourage them to give me an example where enough foreign aid has been given and specifically allocated to animal conservation. We think this is systematically not true. They don't give us any analysis as to why it would possibly be the case. No, thank you. Secondly, they give us the example of, the climate agreement's happening, so clearly lots of countries are prioritizing animal conservation. Firstly, recognize that countries are dropping out of the climate agreement left and right, ladies and gentlemen. Canada has dropped out of has rescinded support of the climate agreement. Donald Trump has rescinded the United States' support. So where is this foreign investment coming from if it is happening, right? Because if this climate agreement is so good and if every country is working so hard towards it, why is it the case that these changes haven't actually already happened, given that climate agreements have been happening for ages, and that also just to point out, only a tiny subset of the clauses in the climate agreement actually have to do with the endangered animals. This was a poorly chosen example on their side. Fourthly, they give you their only rebuttal to our systematic reasons why the government has no incentive to cater towards endangered animals, are 5 points of sophisticated analysis by saying, well, endangered animals help a country too. Never gave us any analysis as to why this is the case, why for some reason the government's desire to help, why having more endangered animals be alive is going to help the government in the ways that having a flourishing lumber industry is going to do, or helping plant soybeans to feed your people. They never give us any reasons why governments have more of an incentive to cater towards rare species in their environment than they do the people who are starving on the streets. And that's why we tell you that states are not going to do this, B, have no incentive to do this and have bigger things to worry about, and C, are petitioned by their people to help them. No people who are starving on the streets are going to say, oh, hey, Brazilian government, please help me with the endangered animals here. They're going to say, hey, I don't have money to feed my family. Welfare is a really big problem, and that's the priority that the government is going to take. Fourthly, no thank you. They tell us that there's going to be pressure from the other governments. We see that this is not true, right? Because in the case that these developing countries are as corrupt as we say, are the ones that need the most resource allocation, the pressure isn't going to be to focus on endangered animals because there's no political pressure in those developed countries to pressure these other countries, right? We think that the pressure is to improve human rights standards, to improve worker standards in these countries. There's simply not enough pressure. They never gave us reasons for why there even would be this pressure in this last place. Fifthly, why NGOs, they talk about how NGOs can't possibly convince people because NGOs aren't charismatic, but the government, of course, will be able to convince lots and lots of people. This is simply not true. NGOs' primary incentive, organizations like the World Wildlife Fund, primarily allocate resources towards marketing, towards, no thank you, dispelling towards the people of sub-Saharan Africa that ivory farming is bad, that poaching is not something that should be supported, and that the black market trade for resources that exploit endangered animals are things that should be denounced by society. NGOs are far better at doing this political campaigning because that's something that's a priority to them. And we tell you this in our speech. We tell you why the specific commitment that NGOs have and other private enterprises have towards animals makes them care about these animals more and make them likely to create incentives that are going to, no thank you, directly affect these animals, whereas governments have a lot of other things to care about and a lot of reasons not to care about these animals, as the 5 reasons we pointed out. Lastly, we tell you why philanthropists are going to be able to do this better. This goes completely unresponded. We tell you about the calculated investor risk and the steady flow of cash you get, and how in an economic recession, even if the government is spending some money on endangered animals, they're now going to pull it all away. And now I'm going to show you why that results in massive amounts of corruption and animal poaching, which is what we are trying to protect against. But first, if you have a point of information, I'll take one.
So the benefits for the government of making damaging action are marginal and have a huge cost of doing it towards ecosystems and so on. Governments are in the best position to make decisions about this from their panels of experts. The population rarely cares as much.
So you can see that the population doesn't care enough about these animals. So we think that if the population doesn't care enough about these animals, and the government's not going to make policies that benefit these ecosystems because they ultimately are accountable to their people, you just undermine yourself in your own POI. Now on to my point about government corruption, right? So we see that private enterprise keeps workers happy because they give them a steady work of pay, they hire rangers at a consistent rate because they have consistent investors. It's not variable to whether or not the government is in an economic recession or whether the government has a lot of excess capital this month. As a result, when the state is in economic recession, as my partner told you, they're going to start giving far more flexible employment contracts to people who engage in activities that protect against wildlife, right? And what we think is going to happen on this side is that when you have less people being paid by the government, it's going to make it far easier for those people to agree to scams like being bribed in order to allow a poacher to be allowed into the Amazon rainforest. Because these people are now vastly underpaid and don't know when their next job is going to be. So why would an individual in a why would an individual in a state enterprise that's not actually being paid very well, that's not actually being regulated very well, because we've told you why these states have poor systems in order to make sure that this actually exists. Why would they be less likely to they're far more likely to be bribed and things like that? Whereas, on the comparative, in private industry, you're being paid directly by the company that you see above you. The employers have an incentive to check up on these people because this is the only project that they're working on, because they're specifically focused on these industries. And as a result, you get far less people accepting bribes from these individuals who want to poach animals, who want to farm for ivory. And that's why governments, when they only offer a flexible rate at which people can get employment, this fosters the type of corruption that we're trying to talk about, right? Because Team Wales shows you why the state is incompetent and endangers animals, and because they fail to respond to any of our case about the systematic reasons why this is, we are so proud to propose.
The second speaker from proposition team spent 8 minutes 13 seconds.
I would like to thank the second proposition for speech. Now, to explain the case of the opposition, let's call upon Mr.
The only assertion given by Team Proposition is their analysis based on the fact that governments today only care about short-term economic growth, which is simply false. So proud to again oppose. I'll be doing a couple of things today. First, some responses, and then secondly, about why governments are more efficient in their resources, our last standard. So let's get into some rebuttal. Again, we live today in a turning point where more and more diplomatic influence, shown through different agreements and shown through more government care and support to these issues, means that governments are more likely today to put more weight in these issues about endangered species. Why? Because we see that there is a long-term harm that will cause a major harm in the future to these governments because of this. For example, as we gave you before, bees, which are essential to everything growing today, has been more and more endangered. We see that in oceans, we see the coral and algae are decreasing too, which are essentially giving oxygen to our society. And we are seeing the consequences to this also, which means that governments who have shown their support are more and more incentivized to do this. And they're more and more incentivized to put diplomatic pressure and to give foreign aid to these countries. So actually, their characterizations about governments aren't as true now as they were before, and they're changing rapidly as the situation worsens. So, let's look at their case. They're giving us the first argument, no thank you, about the underdeveloped world and states in them, where they're saying that they won't get funds, that they don't have the resources, the natural resources means that they would build industries and such. But here we see that in these countries, we have to notice that private institutions probably wouldn't work either, because in these populations that aren't actually able to fund these private institutions, they won't be able to be as effective. They won't be able to get their funding in the first place just as the government is able to spend. Which means that we have to look at foreign governments and foreign institutions work instead. So we're saying that even if governments like in the actual countries aren't able to put as much funding because they're not able to, we're saying that the foreign governments are more able to do so instead with their support and with their funding instead. And like a problem with NGOs is that they do not have the legal capacity, as given before with our argument, to do things such as make things illegal, so to do things such as like changing people's behaviors through more legislative ways. This is something not responded to at all by proposition, which we need to hear, because their only actual like analysis on why charity or why NGOs are more efficient is because they somehow have a more steady income, which I'll be taking on later in my argument. No, thank you. Okay, so moving on to some more responses about, first of all, them saying that like Canada and the US have gone out from the Paris Peace Agreement. Doesn't that show that countries are less and less incentivized? But we're saying that basically all other countries are still in the agreement, all other countries still have the incentives. And they're saying that like, and they have not given us a response to our second argument, which is so important because like these charities and NGOs have only the incentive to cater to the people and the individuals. That means that they're going to put more focus on animals that are like higher up on people's cute factor, on what people actually care about, instead of actually caring about the issues that matter in society, such as bees, such as algae in the ocean, such as microorganisms that play an essential role in ecosystems. Government has the incentive to change this because they see the consequences. NGOs do not because they basically see the demands of the population. Go ahead.
What incentives are there for a government to protect the algae?
Because the whole population is based on this fact. Like otherwise, in the future, as we see consequences rising, people are more likely to get harmed from this. They are less likely to be able to do things that were otherwise. They have the incentive there. Okay, let's move on to our argument about resource efficiency, where we'll prove to you that governments have the wealth necessary and are more able to fund and sustain the saving of endangered species. So we see that private entities today has two problems. Firstly is that they're entirely dependent on private funding, meaning that resources are diverted into other things. This is because to be able to get funding, they must be able to convince people to give them money. Which means that they will have to advertise a lot and continually. Because if they ever stop advertising, people will forget about the problem that they're trying to present and will no longer show interest to donations. This is because they might turn to other charities, they might not like see their name as familiar, or other things. So what ways would people spend the money on advertising? For example, through expensive ad time on the television, radio, and the internet. Through like expensive fundraising campaigns, employing people, getting equipment, stuff like that. No, thank you. Employing people to go out in the street and give people pamphlets and like educate the population in these issues to be able to give them money. All of these are resources that are essentially wasted. And there's a lot of political capital from the people required to make them do such a thing as give a private institution their own money. In the government side, when the government is the main actor, they will not have to convince a lot of people to do this, and the population to keep putting effort in. Meaning that when there is like eco-friendly government in office, they will spend more money of the budget directly to saving animals because they have no advertisements necessary to do this. Okay, go ahead.
Governments also have to tell their people why they think something is important. They don't get to do what they want. So why does this not exist under your side of the house?
Okay, so usually, like budgets from governments have a few percent, a very small amount of the whole budget itself is based to go to endangered animals. While the majority of the budget are based around other things about the other priorities. We believe that governments are more incentivized to cater to people where they affect them the most, but they can also have different issues and different things in their budget, so that this isn't as essential than it is for private institutions. The second problem is that charities are inconsistent, which clashes against their analysis. This is because they are driven on profit. It means that the money that they get differs from month to month and year to year. And it's natural that a private entity has some ups and downs depending on how many people are willing to fund them one month and the other. The necessary or the necessary ups and downs of private entities means that there will be periods where they are not able to put as much resources into saving animals than before. That means that they will be employing less people, sending people back from the zones, or cutting down on the number of areas they can cover, or being able to do less in the areas that they're in, because with less money they have less power. And this is really bad and important, because to be able to save a species, you can't care about them for 1 month and not do anything the other. Because in the period where you're out or at a financial disadvantage, the entire project can go south. And you also have the potential to go bankrupt, which is even worse for the animal. A government, however, not funded by private donators, has no problem because their budget had a set amount that for long term can be consistent, meaning for consistent effort to be able to change for a larger period of time, as opposed when only funding through private donators. So because governments have the power to do this, because they have the incentive to do this, and because they don't have to deal with the problems that private entities do, we are so proud to oppose. Thank you.
Second speaker from opposition team spent 8 minutes at 7.
Let's take the second opposition for the speech. Now, the concluding case of the opposition is called for the first speaker, is Mr. Shuja.
After 2 constructive speeches from that side, my first speaker's 5 structural reasons why governments are incapable to cater to the needs of endangered species still stand in the House. Until they take that down, we think we have clearly told you why governments are horrible actors and private companies will be far better actors. In this speech, I want to ask 2 questions. Firstly, how do you engage communities better to protect animals? And secondly, which actor is better suited rather compared to the systematic reasons we already gave you? Firstly, how do you engage communities better? their mode of logic here is to tell us two things. One, that laws solve everything, and secondly, that it's hard to emotionally relate to the core causes of endangering species. Firstly, in order for you to get laws in the first place, you need consumer awareness. And without any consumer awareness, it's literally impossible to incentivize the government to create some policy changes, right? Or to have some judicial hearings in this case. Private entities are far, far better structurally to create the consumer awareness. Why? Because they can make animal protection a priority in national discourse. How do they do it? A, through graphic campaigning. So for example, the PETA videos you see about animal rights abuse creates a very strong narrative in the minds of vegetarians that it's immoral to kill animals and to eat them. Given that's true, the same ability does not lie with government. Secondly, by witty social media campaigning, right? So like the worldwide, the WWF creates witty adverts about like pandas are cute and they will be endangered if you don't save them, and that sticks in the minds of people. And thirdly, like these private entities lobby their states to include the things they want, like more aid to this endangered species in the first place. Given all of these things are true, without consumer awareness, you will literally have no laws being created in your country. And all of this stuff happens a lot better through private entities because they operate in the private market, they interact with people directly, where governments sit in their like air-conditioned civil service and public service places, and they don't really know how to create this consumer awareness. But secondly, if it's true that algae bloom is a problem, or like what's the other example we have got, like the bee thing is a problem, and it's hard to emotionally relate to it, why would governments emotionally relate to it? I mean, if people can relate to it, then why do governments have an incentive to talk about this niche thing that happens, like a small change in atmosphere that happens which causes an environmental apocalypse? The only way you could have that is if like private entities make it important, right? Like if like in their world the same criticism stays that no one will relate to it, and no one, because governments care about people, people don't relate to it, that's why like governments won't relate to it. That's pretty simple logic right there. But this undermines the fact that we have seen a global shift towards better protection for animal rights. The fact that veganism and vegetarianism has gone up so high in the world is an active contribution of the private industry, of NGOs, and of ethical considerations that these companies push for. So that's a very big thing that happens in the world already. But secondly, often governments stay complicit in poaching and deforestation. We argued it from the very beginning of the debate and they had no response. We told you how governments have populist incentives, that they are happy to tolerate deforestation for timber because it keeps local villagers happy, and when they're happy, you get more votes in next election. Secondly, like oftentimes officials are corrupted to start with, like government officials are exceptionally corrupted, and they would rather steal timber from public land than use it for good use. Given that's true, what incentives do corrupt politicians have to care for it? But here, in our world, when they're regulating and not running these businesses themselves, they have more incentive to not let private human beings be corrupted, because they're not gaining anything directly. So even in the corruption point, we think that's a lot better. But finally, job security for government employees is a lot higher. Which means if you have employees who are tacitly complacent in poaching, it's very hard to kick them out, because like in general in most government services, job security is very high. Whereas private corporations are efficient. They can simply fire an employee who has some amount of grounding in illegal activities, something that doesn't happen in their world. So in conclusion, illegal activities are curbed more in private model. Secondly, communities are better engaged when consumer awareness is built, and that happens a lot better in our world as well. I'll take you.
The WWF spends a majority of their budget on saving pandas, who aren't necessary to ecosystems and aren't technically endangered anymore. Is this good?
No, they make adverts on pandas, and they use the money to fund all sorts of animal protection. They don't only save pandas. But the fact of the matter remains that they are the creative people you need for the changes you want to achieve. But secondly, like I directly destroyed your argument about why that spending is not good. Because without this spending on marketing and advertisement, you will never get consumer awareness to create any change in society. Your consumer needs to build that up again. Alright, secondly, second clash. Which actor is better suited? And here, we have comprehensively won this clash, and they had no responses to the 5 systematic reasons we argued for which governments are not going to care about animals. Odu told you that most states who have a lot of biodiversity are extremely poor or developing. We literally gave you geographical analysis as to how these countries are closer to equator, and for whatever reasons economists don't know, these countries are often very poor. Like the fact of the matter is unemployment in Brazil is very high. Tanzania has lions, Sub-Saharan Africa has lions, and Indonesia has one of the largest rainforests in the world, and all these countries are developing. So oftentimes governments don't have enough money to cater to this need. Secondly, they have other priorities, and they are going to focus on those other priorities. Thirdly, governments will gain a lot more money from misappropriating natural resources from an area than to focus on tourism, and they have no response to it, right? And it's a very big point, because if, as a Nigerian government, I can set up an oil rig in an area where an indigenous species live, why would I focus on tourism? I'll literally get thousands of jobs when I set up an oil rig, whereas in the tourism industry, there will be far fewer jobs, which is like statistically true. Like tourism industry employs a lot less people than say an oil rig. But secondly, like the amount of money that I get immediately, and the fact that it's certain, this profit is certain. If I open an oil rig, I'll get this money immediately. Whereas the tourism industry is seasonal and it has ups and downs based on the global recession and like people's willingness to spend on luxuries. The fact that this profit is certain will mean that governments will rather misappropriate natural resources in these portions of land, whereas private entities have specialized in one industry. A tourism company only specializes in tourism. They will not sell this land away because that's the only thing they have specialty in, whereas governments have every incentive to sell it away. But furthermore, we told you about populism and election cycles, why governments are short-term in nature. Their way to respond to it is to assert that governments also care about long-term needs. Let's really let that sink in. Are you telling that a government will care about a problem that happens because bees reproducing in a weird way 50 years down the line over money that they can get from oil rigs at this moment? No. The sort of things you talk about happens 30 years later, 40 years later. Biodiversity does not have any immediate impact, given that's true. No government has any incentive to care for your biodiversity because they won't be able to use it for the next election. All of these things never responded to. But we also told you how capital is safe in our world because the investors internalize risk beforehand. They plan risk beforehand and they stick to their project. Secondly, tourism companies have specialized in this and they can't simply go away. Thirdly, philanthropy can happen, right? Because the Belgian royal family donates a lot of money to this project, which is a private thingy. But furthermore, like rich corporations care about their PR, which means Goldman Sachs also spends a lot of money to protect endangered animals. I don't understand why states will have any incentive. The only thing they say to that is to say, oh, we have foreign aid. Foreign aid is a strategic political tool to get leverage over a population. When the United States gives foreign aid, it wants direct soft power out of it, which means it will only donate to people who are starving, not to animals, because animals don't vote and animals don't give you soft power. Given that's true, foreign aid is not sufficient to beat the 5 sophisticated reasons Odu talked about. In conclusion, Team Wills is proud to stand under the team line that states in compete as endangered animals, and that's why we're very proud to stand in proposition.
Third proposition teams spend 8 minutes 21 seconds.
I'd like to thank the third proposition for the speech. Now, the concluding case of the opposition has come upon the third speaker of opposition B, Ms. Christine.
Okay, so we believe this motion is about how important it is to conserve animals and different species that are endangered or rare, and how governments are the best at doing so. We are not saying that private entities are incapable of doing so, but we say that when governments put their will towards it, they are in a much better position to actually make the changes and use the resources properly in order to get the best results. Now today I think there's three main points that I'm going to be bringing up, and that's going to be about like pragmatism and actual resource allocation, about like the resources that are available, both financial and political capital, as well as the government will. And what we've been doing is proving our burdens of how like we're changing damaging behavior through the government, through legislature, but also how like the government is more resource efficient in actually prioritizing the conservation of animals. I'd first of all like to engage with just like some points of, I'm going to be engaging with what the proposition has just said. So they first of all said that like, that private entities are specialized in one industry. Now what we've been saying on opposition bench time and time again is first of all that governments also have like an interest in conserving animals, but also they have a much wider range of influence. No, thank you. So like specialization counts for something, but we say first of all governments that do generally have experts on conservation within the governments who actually are knowledgeable about the subject. We don't think the specialization point applies, but we also say that their reach is much more broad. They actually have control over legislature. They can change how people act. They can restrict access to certain areas. They can divert resources exactly as they want to. No, thank you. And they can set laws for actually what animals, are legal to kill and what animals are not legal to kill. These are things that private entities cannot do. And if they want to change legislature in this way, if they want this protection over whole areas, whole regions, people's private property, then they actually have to go through the government. We think that the government, therefore, is already has that mandate for changing people's behaviour. We gave you extensive analysis in our first speech of why it's human action that is the biggest danger to animals. Things like pollution and climate change caused through carbon emissions and so on. Things that are inherent to like what humans do, and things that governments are in the best position to change, such as through the implementation of carbon taxes, such as restricting like deforestation. No, thank you. So on this point of like resources, they say our government is simply not going to have the resources to pay this. Now, like first of all, we pointed out that there is like fluctuation for private entities as well. So the thing about private entities is they're very reliant on the buy-in of people and the donations that people provide, or like the access people, the money people have access to. Now, people's spending varies hugely from year to year, and this and fluctuates wildly. And this is especially true for things that aren't really necessary to people's private lives. Thank you, such as donations to WWF. The amount of income an organisation like that gets in from like private donations is going to be hugely different depending on how like the economy in their home country is doing. This is less true for governments that have set tax intake, but also assuming that they have the will to conserve animals, they are going to be putting a similar amount of money into that each year because they don't want their own efforts undermined. They say that foreign aid doesn't go to conservation. Now we say that even when aid doesn't go, it's even if we accept this and we say that like every country in the world actually has that has endangered species actually receives foreign aid that is conditional on that they spend it on the conservation of foreign species. So we think this is a falsity on that point. But even when aid doesn't go to conservation, we say that foreign governments still have the ability. Governments still have the ability to influence, such as being able to prevent people from cutting down trees in the first place. They have that mandate. So they furthermore say that WWF pays for like all the different animals, and we pointed out that pandas are no longer endangered. A lot of the animals that WWF is supporting are not like the most important ones to save for like ecosystems as a whole. In fact, these animals are very reliant on the ecosystems that they live in. So destructing those ecosystems in other ways is also like a waste of resources on their side if they're going to put all those resources on saving the animal at the top. So no, thank you. No, it's not true that they pay for like all the animals we pointed out on our side, but also we say that like these organizations are less efficient, and we pointed out why. Because they have to spend huge amounts of money on campaigning, on advertising their animals, on getting people to make those donations in the first place. So on the other side, the government can act in order to make like policy decisions that are beneficial to people in the long term, and it doesn't have to waste time persuading people that it's doing like the right thing all the time, because it doesn't. No, thank you. Because all people really care about is that the government is doing something for that, and we think that the government doesn't have to spend so much time doing this. Also, we put it out also like the point of political capital, because again, like organizations function on the buy-in of like individuals. We say this isn't true for governments, and they can implement stuff like prevent agricultural buildings and so on without the need, thank you, of like huge amounts. So on the point of pragmatism. And they said that the government isn't going to protect, like the government isn't incentivized to protect algae either. Well, the comparative is that they don't on proposition side either. But we say that there's a lot of governments around the world that are doing a lot to protect even the animals people don't think about. And they're going to focus on these, unlike on proposition side. Now they talk about like education and like, these organizations do a huge amount to educate people about like tigers that need to be saved. Well, we say like on our side, states generally pay for like the education of like the population through school, and this is actually something that's generally included, is about like biology and the conservation of species and ecosystems. So we think also that like the form of education that's actually like comprehensive on our side rather than just talking about tigers on their side is actually a superior form, again provided through the states if education is an important point here. So like also, no thank you. So we also say like people are very willing to contribute to your private organizations because they don't want to pay their own money. But we say people are a lot more happy when tax money that's already been taken from them is then used partially towards conservation. People are less likely to be upset by that, versus on their side, like they actually have to go out and make a donation, they have to make an effort. Even if people care, they oftentimes aren't willing to make that effort. So they say governments are often complicit in like all these damaging things. We say private companies can like be equally corrupt and they can take donators' money, and we think like there's examples of that having happened because like they do have like these incomes that can be easily removed. We say that governments are already scrutinized. Actually, I can take a PI now.
Governments legislated about animal protection in farms because PETA had extensive campaigning. How would that have happened if PETA did not campaign?
Okay, so like we think that first of all, a lot of this has to do with, again, we think education on our side is comparatively better and it's a lot more comprehensive. On your side, yes, you have a benefit, but it's very limited to like this one instance because it gets people emotionally riled up. We think the comprehensive education that covers like loads of things on our side of the house actually comes with a lot more benefits, a lot more important awareness. So last thing on like government will, and they've been saying again and again that governments prioritize elsewhere. Now, we can concede to a degree that sometimes governments do prioritize, but we say that all governments with, first of all, endangered species do get conditional aid, but also the benefits of having damage policy are marginal, and they come at a huge environmental cost. So we say that governments are becoming increasingly aware in the status quo that endangered species are a big problem and the effects are seen on like ecosystems and stuff. And these often harm the most vulnerable people in the developing countries that the proposition has wanted to talk about. We also say that governments do have like their experts on them and they think much more long term that they must help the environment. They don't just focus on the tide that's living now and that's going to be like hard by like an ecosystem collapse anyway. So like for all these reasons, I'm incredibly proud to oppose this motion.
For the question, speakers spend 8 minutes 6 seconds.
Now we're moving into 4 minutes reply speeches. To deliver the official reply speech, I call upon Ariana. Oh, sorry. Johan.
We were kind of surprised by the characterization that was brought here by Team Wales from the start, because the way they seem to paint the whole picture is that, first of all, governments basically don't spend any money on animal protection, and if they do, all of that is lost through corruption and through reallocating of resources. We think that wasn't really the debate that we came here with. We came here telling you about when we're debating the resources being spent. Governments spend those resources better and also have power that NGOs can't do. I think we've proven our burden, so proud to oppose. So I'm going to have two clashes in this reply speech. First of all, do governments act overall? And second of all, who uses resources and capital best? So first of all, do governments act? Because we think this is basically where Team Wales has wanted to engage, telling you that no, they don't under any circumstances. We tell you, why do they act? First of all, because it's a turning point at this point. We tell you that ecosystems are incredibly vulnerable, and if like one thing goes out, it's like a house of cards falling down. It affects everyone, including humans. We think because of this, governments are incredibly incentivized that they need to save those ecosystems that are left there, so they need to spend the money there. But secondly, we told you, why will they act? Well, because there's pressure from other governments. First of all, there is development aid, and this aid is allocated to different things. So some of it might be allocated to poverty, like they like to talk about, but some of it is allocated to animal protection, and it's contingent on that. That aid would be removed if it wasn't allocated there. So we think because of this, there's always some kind of money that is being spent by governments on protecting it, and if that isn't the case, that money will be removed from these developing countries who seem to who they seem to characterize, who steal this development aid money and use it on only poverty alleviation. But then we think, so let's move into the clash that we think is the most important here. Who uses resources and capital the best? Well, we think they haven't really wanted to engage here on this plane, except for like 2-3 minutes in their third speech. But we told you that first of all, the only real benefit they have is that governments that NGOs can get money from, say, billionaires. We've told you that, governments maybe spend a few percent, like a few pieces of a percent, just from their budget on these kinds of things, but that's still a substantial amount of money. We told you 3 things in our case today. We told you that government has power that is impossible for NGOs to have. That is the power of law and taxation. They can tax products that harm animals, and they can forbid things that harm animals. That's power that NGOs will never have. The only way they have it is by actually lobbying the actual government to do these kinds of things. The only responses we heard were contingent on the fact that governments don't care about animals at all. Second thing we told you that governments can spend their resources more wisely because they don't have to care about how cute animals are in order to fundraise, because governments will have tax money anyway. They don't need to prioritize pandas, which are cute but not as important as bees, which literally threaten our whole ecosystem if they go extinct. They told us that no, the WWF doesn't do this. We don't think that's a sufficient response. Lastly, we told you about, because governments don't need to focus on PR, because they can just listen to their experts and say, hey, look at this. This species is being incredibly threatened. They can spend the money that they actually have exclusively on protecting the kind of the animals that are the most vulnerable in animal society. So because we think that governments just have more power and the resources they have, they can be spent better, we are so proud to oppose it.
The final position speaker spent 4 minutes and 10 seconds.
Now, to conclude the case for the proposition P and the debate as a whole, I call upon Ms. Ariana.
animals has told you from the first 30 seconds of our speech that the reason why we're proud to stand in proposition is because states' incompetence endangers animals. We've proved to you why this is the case, and Team Sweden has completely ignored this fact. They have skirted the arguments we've given you, while giving you vague arguments that never actually had any analysis to them and had impacts that we can also achieve on our side. 4 questions in this reply. Firstly, what does the world look like now and how do we disagree? Secondly, who is the best suited actor, the government or private enterprise? And I'll be looking through this in 3 different lenses. Firstly, on the idea of policy and who makes better or who causes better policies. Secondly, the idea of soft incentives in marketing and who gets more public support. And thirdly, about this idea of poaching and corruption and who benefits on that scale. Firstly, on what the world looks like now. Notice they hinge their entire case on the idea that foreign aid occurs and that foreign aid is really prevalent. We give you systematic reasons why that's not the case. We don't think foreign aid exists for these animals. It exists in other areas instead. We give you a characterization in the developing world, which after one rebuttal, they completely drop their contention with, and so they accept that these countries have no money, they don't have enough money to help these animals, so their solution is foreign aid. We tell you why that doesn't exist. This entire point falls. They do not understand, they do not win the characterization of this debate at all. They tell us, secondly, that the reason why the way the world looks like now, only the government has access to experts. We tell you that private enterprises also have experts. This entire point is substantiated on their side about how experts are the reason why governments are able to make better decisions for animals is completely untrue, and we also get that on our side of the house. This doesn't really stand. They lastly tell us that that private entities can be corrupt as well. They give us this analysis in their third about why this is really important. We tell you from the first speaker to our third that regulation is the government's job. Regulation of these private industries is the government's job, and that these governments, and that's where it should lie. Notice the mischaracterization on their side that laws will just happen, that legislation just passes, and that it doesn't require any benefit from the people. We tell you why legislation requires the will of the people, and why in a country that is corrupt, or in a country that is as underprivileged as Tanzania, as Zimbabwe, that this pressure doesn't exist, and that it only exists when private corporations make the people care. And now we'll be talking about why that is better. Firstly, they tell you that the government will make good policies because they're going to prioritize the right animals over the wrong ones. Now, this animal discrimination within each other, logic is very lost on me, but what the principle is that private enterprises focus on pandas, the government's going to focus on algae. They never tell us why. Firstly, we think that the reasons that they state that for this to be the case is because of advertising assumptions. We give you analysis as to why this advertising is the only way that companies can result in public pressure, and why this public pressure is the thing that creates laws. Lastly, they tell you that state education is better than marketing, and that me reading a textbook when I'm in 5th grade about why algae is so important is going to override this animal discrimination. I'm unclear about why this is the case and why marketing campaigns aren't successful. This is very confusing point of contention in this debate. We tell you that private enterprises are good for 3 reasons. We tell you that they are the ones that are able to have the most commitment to these people, specific commitment. We tell you that they're the ones who have constant investment, that have foreign investment from philanthropists. This goes unresponded to and is nearly skirted on their side. And lastly, I bring you an entire substantive point about why poaching and corruption is far more likely on their side, and they have not mentioned a word about it in their entire 3 speeches, right? We don't think that they clearly concede that that's the case. We think that no other reason, corruption and poaching is worse on their side, and we get that better in private enterprises. The question is who will actually spend this money? We think the answer is private enterprises. Who can spend this money? Private enterprises, because these governments, as we've told you, are severely impoverished and have other things to think about. And who gets better results in terms of people support? We think that is overwhelmingly on private industries. Lastly, we gave you systematic reasons as to why states' incompetence will always endanger animals, why they're not the best place actor, why private enterprises is, because they failed to support support states in an adequate way. We are so proud to propose.